The letter trembled in Marshal Tom Garrison's weathered hands, the ink still wet enough to smear under his thumb. She's coming back to Deadwood Creek. Tonight. No signature, but he knew the handwriting, angular, precise, like everything else about her. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he couldn't bring himself to move from his desk, couldn't stop staring at those 5 words that changed everything. Outside, the wind rattled the jailhouse windows, carrying the scent of approaching rain and something else, trouble maybe, or just memories. In this God-forsaken town, they were often the same thing. Tom folded the letter carefully, his fingers tracing the crease where he'd opened it too hastily. 15 years. 15 years since Sarah McKenna had vanished into the desert with a bullet in her shoulder and his deputy's badge clutched in her bloodied fist. The townspeople called it justice when she fled, said she got what she deserved for choosing the wrong side. But Tom knew better. He knew what she'd sacrificed that night, and what it had cost them both. The marshal's badge on his chest felt heavier now, like it always did when he thought about how he'd earned it, how he'd let her take the blame, how he'd built his reputation on her ruin. A knock echoed through the small office, 3 sharp raps, deliberate and familiar. Tom's hand instinctively moved to his holster, then stopped. If Sarah wanted him dead, she wouldn't announce herself. She'd taught him that much, back when they were partners, back when he thought he knew the difference between right and wrong. "It's open," he called, his voice steadier than he felt. The door swung inward, revealing not Sarah but young Billy Chambers, the town's newest deputy. The boy's face was flushed with excitement and fear, a combination Tom remembered wearing himself once upon a time. Marshal, Billy panted. "There's been a shooting at the Silver Dollar, 3 men down," and he paused, swallowing hard. "And there's a woman asking for you by name. Says she's got business to settle." Tom's blood turned to ice water. She wasn't waiting until tonight after all. Sarah McKenna had come home to Deadwood Creek, and she was starting exactly where they'd left off, with gunfire and ghosts and choices that would haunt them both. The Silver Dollar saloon reeked of gunpowder and fear. When Tom pushed through the batwing doors, 3 bodies lay sprawled across the sawdust-covered floor, their blood already turning dark in the lamplight. But it wasn't the dead men that made his breath catch. It was the woman standing behind the bar, calmly pouring herself a whiskey as if she owned the place. Sarah McKenna looked older, harder, with silver threading through her dark hair and new scars mapping stories across her sun-weathered skin. But her eyes, those steel-gray eyes that had haunted his dreams, were exactly the same. They met his across the silent saloon, and for a moment 15 years collapsed into nothing. "Hello, Tom." Her voice carried the same quiet authority it always had, the kind that made dangerous men listen and smart men think twice. "You're looking well for a man living with blood on his hands." The handful of surviving patrons pressed themselves against the walls, sensing the electricity in the air. Tom stepped carefully around the bodies, recognizing them now, the Garrett brothers and their cousin Pete, all 3 wanted for robbery and worse. All 3 carrying bounties that would feed a family for months. "Sarah," he kept his voice level, professional, "these men draw on you first." She lifted her glass in a mock toast. "They recognized me, if that's what you're asking. Seems my reputation precedes me these days." She drank, never taking her eyes off his face. "Funny thing about reputations, Tom. Sometimes they're built on lies, sometimes they're all a person has left." The weight of his badge seemed to burn through his shirt. Every person in that saloon knew the story, how Deputy Tom Garrison had tracked down the notorious Sarah McKenna 15 years ago, how she'd shot 2 innocent men before escaping into the desert, how his pursuit of her had earned him his marshal's star and the respect of every lawman from here to Santa Fe. None of them knew the truth, that those innocent men had been ready to hang a 14-year-old boy for stealing bread, that Sarah had been the only one brave enough to stand between the mob and the child, that Tom had arrived too late to help, but just in time to make a choice that would define both their lives. "You came back," he said quietly. "Had to." Sarah set down her glass with deliberate care. "Someone's been spreading lies about me, Tom, using my name to cover their tracks. 3 towns over, 4 dead families, all blamed on Sarah McKenna. Her voice hardened. But we both know I've been in Mexico these 15 years, don't we? Which means someone else has been playing my ghost. Outside, Tom could hear horses approaching. Too many horses moving too fast. The sound every lawman learned to fear. The hoofbeats thundered closer, a dozen horses at least, their riders pushing hard toward the silver dollar. Tom moved to the window, peering through the grimy glass as dust clouds rose in the gathering dusk. Torches flickered in the distance, carried by men who rode with the grim purpose of a hanging party, expecting company. Sarah asked, but her casual tone didn't fool him. Her hand rested easy on her gun butt, and she'd positioned herself with clear sightlines to both the front door and the back exit. "Not my company," Tom replied, though his stomach knotted with the certainty of what was coming. Word traveled fast in small towns, and Sarah McKenna's return would be bigger news than Christmas and the 4th of July combined. The riders burst into the main street like a storm front, their leader's voice carrying clear through the saloon's thin walls. "Tom Garrison, we know she's in there. Send out the McKenna woman and nobody else has to die tonight." Tom recognized the voice, Judge Harrison Cole, Deadwood Creek's self-appointed voice of justice and father to one of the men Sarah had supposedly killed 3 towns over. The same Judge Cole who'd been ready to string up that hungry boy 15 years ago, until Sarah's bullets had scattered the mob. "Seems your friend out there has a personal interest in seeing me hang," Sarah observed, checking her ammunition with practiced efficiency. "Question is, Marshal, which side of that door do you plan to be on when the shooting starts?" The question hung between them like smoke from a funeral pyre. Tom's badge caught the lamplight, reminding him of everything he'd built on the foundation of her sacrifice. His reputation, his career, his standing in the community, all of it rested on the lie that Sarah McKenna was a cold-blooded killer who'd escaped justice. "Sarah McKenna," Cole's voice boomed again. "You've got 1 minute to show yourself, or we're coming in after you." Through the window, Tom counted at least 15 armed men, some carrying rope alongside their weapons. This wasn't about arrest or trial, this was about vengeance, pure and simple, the kind of frontier justice that left bodies swaying from tree branches and questions buried with the dead. Sarah moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. 15 years ago you had a choice, Tom. You could stand up for what was right, or you could let an innocent woman take the blame for your town's sins." Her eyes searched his face. "Tonight you get to choose again. But this time there's no desert to run to. This time one of us doesn't walk away." The sound of boots on wooden steps announced that Cole's minute was up. "Wait." Tom's voice cut through the tension as the saloon doors began to creak inward. He stepped between Sarah and the approaching mob, his hand raised but not reaching for his weapon. "Judge Cole, this is still my jurisdiction. Nobody comes through that door armed without my say-so." The doors stopped moving. Outside, horses shuffled and men muttered, but Cole's authority held them back, for now. Sarah studied Tom's face in the lamplight, searching for something. "Why?" she asked quietly. "After all these years, why now?" Tom reached into his vest pocket, pulling out a small object wrapped in faded cloth. He placed it gently on the bar between them, a child's wooden horse, roughly carved but painted with careful detail.
Oh,
The same toy that 14-year-old Miguel Santos had been clutching when the mob dragged him toward the hanging tree. "His mother brought this to me last month," Tom said, his voice thick with memory. "Miguel's a teacher now, down in Tucson, married 3 children of his own. She wanted me to have it, said it belonged to the woman who saved her boy's life." Sarah's fingers traced the toy horse's worn edges, and for a moment, the hardness in her eyes softened. "You kept it all these years, reminded me what real justice looks like." Tom's voice dropped lower. "And what it cost the only person brave enough to stand up for it." The silence stretched between them, heavy with 15 years of unspoken truth. Outside, Cole's patience was wearing thin. Tom could hear him pacing, rallying his men with whispered promises of righteousness and revenge.
oh.
"Miguel's mother told me something else," Tom continued. She said there's been talk in Tucson about a woman matching your description, helping families escape Apache raiders, bringing medicine to sick children. Said this woman never asked for payment, never stayed long enough for thanks. He met her eyes, said folks started calling her the Desert Angel. Sarah's laugh was bitter but not unkind. Angels don't kill 3 men in a saloon, Tom. No, he agreed. But they do kill 3 wanted murderers who were planning to rob the church collection on Sunday morning. Funny how Judge Cole forgot to mention that part when he was rallying his mob. For the first time since she'd walked back into his life, Sarah McKenna smiled, a real smile, small but genuine. So you finally learned to investigate before you judge. Learned it from the best teacher I ever had, Tom replied, even if it took me 15 years to admit it. The moment shattered as Cole's voice boomed again. Time's up, Garrison. Stand aside or stand with her. Either way, justice will be served tonight. Oh. Tom Garrison stepped out of the Silver Dollar with his hands visible and empty, facing 15 armed men in the flickering torchlight. Judge Cole sat his horse like a king pronouncing sentence, rope coiled at his saddle horn, certainty burning in his eyes. Stand aside, Marshal, Cole commanded. That woman is a killer, and killers face justice in my town, your town. Tom's voice carried across the street with quiet authority. Last I checked, Deadwood Creek was still under territorial law, which makes it my jurisdiction. He pulled the wooden horse from his pocket, holding it where everyone could see. And my investigation shows that Sarah McKenna saved 3 innocent families from the real killers, the same Garrett brothers lying dead in that saloon. Murmurs rippled through the mob as Tom continued. Those boys have been using Sarah's name as cover for months, Judge. Every robbery, every murder blamed on a ghost while the real criminals walked free. Until tonight when they made the mistake of threatening the wrong woman. Lies, Cole snarled. Everyone knows what she did 15 years ago. Everyone knows what I told them 15 years ago. Tom interrupted, his voice growing stronger. And I was wrong. Sarah McKenna didn't shoot 2 innocent men. She shot 2 members of a lynch mob who were about to hang a 14-year-old boy for stealing bread to feed his starving family. He held up the toy horse. This belonged to that boy, Miguel Santos. He's a school teacher now. Thanks to the woman you want to hang. Oh. The crowd's certainty began to waver. These were good people, mostly, led astray by lies and the promise of simple justice in a complicated world. I've carried the truth of that night for 15 years, Tom said, his voice reaching every man in the street. Carried it in shame, built my reputation on another person's sacrifice, but no more. He unpinned the marshal's badge from his chest, holding it up in the torchlight. Sarah McKenna is the finest lawman I've ever known. If anyone deserves to wear this badge, it's her. Oh. Judge Cole's face twisted with rage, his hand moving toward his gun, but he found himself staring down the barrels of 3 rifles, held by townspeople who'd heard enough truth for one night. Go home, Judge, Tom called out. Tell your mob the real Sarah McKenna is back. And if anyone has a problem with justice being served properly in this town, they can take it up with Marshal McKenna. Sarah stepped out of the saloon then, accepting the badge Tom offered with steady hands. She pinned it to her vest with the same quiet dignity she'd worn as a deputy 15 years ago. My first official act, she announced, is to deputize Tom Garrison. Seems this town could use a lawman who's finally learned the difference between justice and revenge. Oh. Years later, travelers passing through Deadwood Creek would hear stories about the 2 marshals who cleaned up the territory, the Desert Angel and her partner, the man who chose truth over reputation. They would speak of the wooden horse that sat on the marshal's desk, a reminder that sometimes justice wears an unexpected face, and that the bravest thing a person can do is admit they were wrong. But in the quiet evenings, when the last drunk had been escorted home and the jail cells were empty, Tom and Sarah would sit on the office porch and watch the sunset paint the desert. Neither spoke of forgiveness. Some debts were too large for words, but in the comfortable silence between old partners, something deeper than forgiveness had taken root. the understanding that redemption, like justice, was something you earned one choice at a time. And when the stars came out over Deadwood Creek, they shone on a town where the truth, however long delayed, had finally come home.